What does he expect? You know, oil prices are going to be on a halt for 20% of the world's oil. You know, um, Trump just doesn't care. He likes to do whatever he wants to do, and then proceed to play like he's the victim. Classic narcissist move. And then, as soon as what is inevitably going to happen happens, he tells everybody it is the left wing lunatics that are making gas prices go up. And it's fucking ridiculous, dude. Let's check out this clip of the U.S. base in Qatar being bombed. Allahu Akbar. Madam. Hey, Shatterfuckface. How you doing? PH. Yeah, so my understanding is there were something like 6 missiles launched at them. Let's see. Breaking American Patriot missile defense system activating as Iran launches 6 missiles towards U.S. forces in Qatar. So basically, Trump is putting our men and women in danger because he felt like it, you know? It's like we knew this was going to happen. We got bases all over the place in the Middle East, and yet he still launches attacks in the Middle East. It doesn't take a goddamn genius to know that that's what's going to happen, you know? Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say about who am I? What's up? I don't know what to say about, you know, our our bases being bombed. I mean, it's an obvious retaliation result of America bombing Iran. You know, Iran's right here. There's water, and then Qatar's right there. Like it's one of the more obvious choices to shoot at. I would I would have hoped it would have went more towards Israel because they're the ones that are, you know, really pushing for these wars and stuff. But it sends more of a statement if you do it towards the place that is actually going up against you. So let's take a look at this. The son of Iran's last Shia says he's ready to take over the Iranian leadership and lead the country's transition to democracy. So we already have this dude on the stands like, excuse me, can you please choose me for regime change? I would really like to be the new leader of the regime change. As we all know, that's what America is here for, right? To bring democracy to the Middle East, of course.
This regime is defeated, teetering on the edge of collapse, and must not be allowed to continue. The time has come to end this ruin and begin a new era for Iran. This is a new dawn for Iran's lion and son. I am here today to submit myself to my compatriots to lead them down this road of peace and democratic transition. I do not seek political power, but rather to help our great nation navigate through this critical hour towards stability, freedom, and justice.
Dude, it's like, why are they doing this shit? You know, it's like, I don't know exactly who this guy is, but we have seen this playbook 1,000 times before in the Middle East, right? You know, somebody gets mad at whatever somebody else is doing. They're not free enough over there, right? That's our standpoint. We can't have any, you know, non-democracies, you know, around the world. So if you have something other than democracy, that's just not going to work for us, you know. We just can't have that. You know, as far as I'm concerned, this is America, and America first, all right? And where's all these America first people? You know, all of them are crickets in the background. You don't hear nothing about them about, you know, Trump bombing Iran for no reason. What America first policy does that come from? You know, last I checked, that's putting America into danger, you know. Massive anti-war, anti-Trump protests have recently erupted in New York City, or just New York, and Washington, D.C., primarily in response to recent U.S. airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities and the Trump administration border policies. So let's look at that real quick. Hell yeah. Bunch of free Palestine stuff in there. No war signs. Yeah, I mean, this is what we want to see in America. We want to see them promoting no wars, right? At least that's what I want to see. No war. Yeah, I mean, what obviously there's going to be protests all over the country, right? Uh so now we not only do we have another No Kings protest is supposed to happen this weekend, we now have anti-bombing campaigns, anti-war campaigns, you know, stopping ICE campaigns, like you name it. Campaigns for everything. You know. Let's watch this JD Vance interview. Who did this interview? I don't know. I think it's Fox News Live now.
Right now.
Well, first of all, we've wanted to come and check out what's actually going on the ground, show some support to the FBI agents, the National Guardsmen, and the Marines who have been here, I think, bringing peace to what was a very chaotic situation thanks to the leadership of Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass. If you really think about what's at stake here is the basic principle of, do we get to enforce federal immigration law when the people's duly elected president says we've got to enforce our borders? And I think obviously the answer is yes. And what you saw in Los Angeles was really, I think, a conspiracy of the mayor, the governor, and a lot of radical left protesters who are going to say, no, we're not going to let people enforce the immigration laws of the United States of America.
Right.
We in the Trump administration had a different attitude towards that. Obviously, you've seen that immigration happen all over Southern California. I think we've now restored some order to Los Angeles, and thank God that we did, because I think absent President Trump's leadership, you would have seen the city really spiral out of control, which we don't want. I think it's a beautiful city. It's got a lot to offer, but you've got to be able to enforce immigration law.
So the riots have stopped. There's still protests, and there's still a lot of tension out there. It feels like something can explode at any moment. There's a lot of anti-ICE sentiment in LA.
Yeah, we're going to just have to wait and see what happens with, you know, Trump and his escalatory policies, right? So, I mean, if Trump wants to carry on with, you know, doubling down with the National Guard, doubling down with the military. I think last I heard there was, something like 700 Marines being deployed in the streets, of LA. And, that's ridiculous. We shouldn't be having untrained military deployed in our streets. The military is trained, but they're trained to do a certain task, and that's kill everything they see, right? But they're not trained for riots, the riot control. They're trained to kill. That's what they do.
What's your metric for determining how long the military is going to be here in Los Angeles? Things are calm right now. Are you going to keep them here for a while in case there's more activity? When do you pull them out?
Well, I think what the president says, you got to do this case by case, right? See how this goes, see where we are in a few days, ensure that you don't have the increase in rioting activity. I mean, look, when these riots break out, people can't access basic services, stores get destroyed, people's economic life is destroyed, and of course, if the riots really get out of control, you have people violently attacked, and that's of course what drove this initially. Is you had FBI agents who were actually being attacked by a mob, and the Los Angeles Police Department, great people by the way, but they were being handcuffed by their.
That's right. They did start as protests. They started as protests. And the LAPD specifically said they have it under control, right? And then Trump wanted to escalate it, therefore calling in the National Guard, even though Gavin Newsom told them that he didn't want the National Guard deployed, right? So that was step one. That was already illegal, And then Trump said, well, Gavin Newsom is just a dumb guy, new scum. He loves a poorly ran city. That's kind of what he does. There's poorly ran cities all over California. There's nothing we could do about it. California just really sucks. Super duper bad, guys. You don't even know. Even though California pays for 20% of the states in America because they can't afford their taxes, But, we're not going to talk about all that, that's just the truth, California has a net surplus of tax dollars to the federal government. And most of these red states around the country, Tennessee, Oklahoma, North Carolina, all these states have a net loss or whatever on taxes. So they have more money coming in from the federal government than they have going out to the federal government, basically. And it's always the poorly ran Democrat cities. Yeah, I mean, who cares? You could say whatever you want, but these states are successful and these red states are not successful. That's just the truth, the fact of the matter.
Political leadership from enforcing the law, saving our FBI agents, and preventing violence against federal law enforcement. So we're going to pull out the troops when we feel confident that level of instability is not going to return. But of course, when that happens and when the president makes that decision, of course, it's easy to put people back in if you feel like that rioting starts to ramp up again.
At the beginning of the administration, the idea was worse first, right? Targeting the worst of the worst criminals.
Sure.
You guys are still doing that, but we're also starting to see Home Depots getting hit, car washes, agriculture workers. Is the net widening? Because we hear, there's targets. They want 3,000 arrests a day. So are you guys widening the net in terms of who you're going after now?
Well, first of all, Bill, let's step back and appreciate just the radical success of the Trump administration. Simply through having a president who cared about border enforcement, we've gone from close to 3 million illegal border crossings per year to actually net negative illegal immigration in this country. In other words, we're deporting far more people than are coming in illegally into our country. That's exactly what should be happening. And that really all it required was a president who empowered federal law enforcement to do the job of enforcing our borders. So, yes, you're right. Now, what do we do? What the president has said is we really want to focus on the illegal immigrants who came during the Biden administration, but also we're enforcing everywhere. In other words, the president has said if you are an
if it was just about illegal immigrants, then it wouldn't be a problem, right? I mean, I'm all for mass amnesty. You know, I think we should make pathways to citizenship and make magic happen. It boosts the economy. Everybody's happy, except the bigoted hillbillies that they wear red hats and, you know, whatnot. But yeah, if it was just criminals, just strictly criminals, I don't think anybody would have a problem with it. See, the problem comes when you call everybody, you know, illegal or whatever. I mean, crossing the border illegally is a misdemeanor. You know, it's not a big deal. Who cares, dude? Whatever. The fact of the matter is that, you know, they're deporting, they're kidnapping kidnapping these people and sending them to, you know, slave labor camps in El Salvador. You know, how's that all right?
Illegal immigrant into this country, you ought to voluntarily go back and come through the proper channels, because we don't want people who have come into the country illegally just staying here indefinitely. That's not the policy of the Trump administration. We've empowered law enforcement to really enforce the law. Yes, we're focusing on the most violent criminals. We're focusing on people who came here illegally over the Biden administration, but put simply, if you came into the country illegally, if you're not a legal resident of the United States of America, you ought to go back home and come through proper channels.
So basically, it's what Tom Homan has said repeatedly. If you're in the U.S. illegally, you're on the table.
If you're in the U.S. illegally, you are at risk of deportation, though obviously we're focusing law enforcement resources on the worst offenders, on violent criminals, and on people who came here recently. That's the main focus. And unfortunately, thanks to the Biden administration, there are millions upon millions of those individuals. We're going to try to enforce immigration laws primarily against them. But yeah, Tom Homan, the president, I'm going to say it right now. If you're in the country illegally, you are at risk of deportation, because you shouldn't be here if you're not consistent with the laws of our country.
So you're here in a big sanctuary city, Los Angeles. There's been a lot of resistance in sanctuary cities across the country, Boston, here in L.A. Activists, you've even got politicians interfering, some politicians getting arrested for interfering with ICE. Is there any...
I will say most people have no idea what sanctuary city even means. Basically, a sanctuary city is a city where immigrants are safe from police harassment. And they put this in place a few years ago, in the 90s, I want to say it was. And this was due to police wanted to have cooperation from immigrant communities. And the only way they were going to have cooperation like that is if they made a sanctuary cities, saying that, you know, we're not going to, you know, look into what you're doing and, you know, harass you and just kick you out of the country, deport you. All we want to do is speak with you about what's going on in the community to get answers for the people that are actually being criminals, you know. But yeah, I mean, right now sanctuary city is just a buzzword for Republicans to spew, and basically, you know, just another word like communist or whatever, you know, a scary buzzword that they can use and, you know, tell their followers to be afraid of everything that's going on.
World in which these activists and politicians throw enough sand in the gears for ICE and the Trump administration, where you guys slow down some of this enforcement. Karen Bass says ICE has to just flat out stop. Is there any world in that's a possibility?
No, that's ridiculous. But you are right that they're trying to throw sand in the gears of enforcement. That's what we see with a lot of these ridiculous court cases. The good news, Bill, is that you're starting to see that the courts start to side with the Trump administration on this very simple principle that the American people elected more border enforcement, and that's exactly what the president is trying to deliver. So I think that with the courts doing what they're doing, and you see us ramping up the deportation efforts, I really do think that you're seeing the enforcement against illegal immigration take a step forward, not a step backward, even though you're right, a lot of far left politicians are trying to change the dynamic. Now, here's the thing, though, about those politicians is how crazy is it that we have a country where you have elected representatives of the American people who seem far more interested in illegal immigrants than they do the citizens of their own country. When Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass give Medicaid to illegal immigrants, let's be honest about what they're doing. They're literally taking medication and medical services away from poor Americans so that they can give it to illegal immigrants. Why?
Republicans are just so fucking scared of everything. Like, why don't you just come out and say, like, we hate these people, we're bigoted, we don't want them to have anything, you know? But he's basically coming out and saying, you know, we don't want our citizens to have it, but we also don't want illegal immigrants to have it. You know, JD Vance is over here acting like he vouches for Medicare for all. You know, he doesn't. What kind of medical services does he want given to Americans? Ones that they can't afford, and, you know, it'll hopefully kill them over time, you know? JD Vance doesn't want what's best for this country. I mean, neither does Gavin Newsom. Let's get fucking real. You know, Gavin Newsom a few years ago, they had a vote for Medicare for all, or it was like their version of Medicare for all or whatever. And he vetoed it. You know, it passed their state house and state senate, whatever it was, and he vetoed the fact that, you know, they were going to subsidize everybody's health care in the state, which would have been such a fucking great move, because that would have been one that trickled down reverberated, if you will, throughout the nation, and really just been a great policy all in all. You know, that's something that would have went towards Oregon and Washington, and then, you know, New York, and, you know, every sane state would have adopted a Medicare for all type system. But yeah, JD Vance fucking sucks. What are you going to do about it?
Why would you want to do that? And why would we be surprised that when you do that, you have an illegal immigration problem on the scale of what they have in California? Immigration enforcement actually should work, states and the federal government working hand in hand. Gavin Newsom should be saying, we're not going to give free benefits to illegal aliens. We're going to give those benefits to American citizens. Meanwhile, us and the Trump administration are going to enforce immigration law. That symbiosis, that working together, I think will make the American people safer, and it'll make our country much better off. But look, if you're going to have politicians like Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom who try to fight immigration enforcement, we're going to use every legal tool at our disposal to get illegal immigrants out of our country. That's what the president was elected to do, and he takes it very seriously.
Last question on this topic. If Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass see this interview, what's your message to them?
Our message to them is very simple. Just do your job. It is so simple to have a country where you do well by the American citizens, by the people who have the legal right to be here, and you enforce the law against people who have violated the law. I don't know why this is a...
Dude, your daddy right now, Daddy Trump, has violated the law more than probably any other politician out there, in modern times at least. This dude has 34 felony charges on him. He's literally a convicted sex offender. You know, what more do you need to, you know, hear yourself talk? Follow the law. Like, what are you talking about, dude? You're following the biggest crook in history right now. I don't know if there's ever been, historically speaking, a more crooked president than we do have right now. This dude literally dropped a shit coin, you know, for his followers to, you know, pay for. Made himself something like, you know, what was it, like $600 million or something. Walked away, rug pulled his constituents, and you don't hear nothing about that no more on the right. You know, they love him for that shit. he also took a $400 million jet from Qatar. The Qatari government gave him a luxury personal jet that, oh, yeah, well, I'm going to replace Air Force One with it, until he doesn't. And then, he takes it with him when he leaves office. If he leaves office, I mean, we don't know if he's actually going to leave office or not, but I don't know.
Controversial proposition. I don't know why Democrats and Republicans can't agree on it. Republicans under President Trump are very clear. We don't want to let people who are in our country illegally stay in our country. We want to enforce the border. We want to make it safe for American citizens to live good lives in their own community. Meanwhile, you have Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom, who seem to want to do everything that they can to make it harder to enforce the law, to empower violent rioters to assault federal law enforcement officers. I mean, Bill, I guess my message to Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass is, why don't you empower the great people of the Los Angeles Police Department to put down some of these violent rioters rather than encouraging them? Why don't you tell illegal immigrants to comply with the law rather than encouraging radicals to assault our FBI agents who are trying to do their job? It's very simple. Support law enforcement. We think great things could happen for the state of California, but it's not going to happen if you have failed political leadership.
I do want to ask you about
We literally have failed political leadership on a federal level. We have a pseudo dictator in office right now that's overreaching as far as he can go by using ICE for something they were not made for, to black bag and deport all these people without due process and whatever. Like, we don't know what's happening with a lot of these people. I mean, yeah, we're seeing videos all over the internet of what's going on and shit, but all these masked Gestapo agents walking around like ICE, we don't know who these people are. We don't even know if they're actually with ICE, a lot of them, And even if they are with ICE agents have no right to arrest citizens. And they specifically arrest U.S. citizens that they know are citizens. So it's like, they literally arrested a New York City mayoral candidate and comptroller. He got arrested for what? Because he was asking, if they have warrants for all these arrests. Because they're supposed to have warrants when they're arresting people, or else they may be arresting the wrong people, and they're not legally allowed to arrest U.S. citizens. ICE was originally made after 9/11 happened under the guise of protecting from terrorists. They're supposed to be looking out for terrorists and whatever. And I believe Trump, when he signed one of his executive orders or whatever, when he got into office for his second term, classified, there was, he said something like, we're being invaded at our borders, classifying all these, quote unquote illegals as terrorists. Which is fucking bullshit, obviously. A lot of these people are just trying to flee bad economic things and war and fucking whatever. But we just can't have nice things in America. That's just what we do here, not have nice things.
There have been all sorts of articles and media reporting about this supposed rift in MAGA world,
sure,
and amongst Republicans about what to do with Iran. How do you see things right now?
Look, what the president said is so perfect about this. I think he gets to define America first because he's the person who ran, who was elected, and who actually leads this movement. And for all of the online chatter, what I see, and I've seen it very privately, of course, and I've seen it very publicly, the president is very focused on a core American national interest. And that national interest is the state of Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. We're pursuing everything that we can to make sure that happens.
And why exactly is that a American interest? So, basically, we know that Netanyahu's been going on and on about Iran having nuclear. They're this far away from having nuclear arms, which there's no proof out there that that is actually the case. The only proof that anybody has is the fact that they are researching nuclear capabilities for energy, but Netanyahu doesn't want them to have that either. What can they have? They got to rub sticks together every night. It's fucking ridiculous. We are the world police, and we get to tell them what they can and can't do all the time, because that's how we roll as America. That's just what we do,
Pursuing diplomatic channels. As you can see, we're supporting the Israelis as they engage in these military operations. We're shooting down Iranian missiles that are coming into Israel. We've been very clear we can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon. And so for the folks, I think, who are frustrated with something about the president's policy.
Because if Iran has a nuclear weapon, then how are we supposed to bomb them whenever we feel like? I think, I don't remember who said it, but it was somebody in the Pakistani government. And they said, what Iran is going through right now would be us if we did not have nukes. And they're 100% right. If they didn't have nukes, they'd have their, they'd have our boot on their throat, just like every other nation that doesn't have nukes. I am not pro nukes for everybody, mind you, because I know the statistical fact, the more nukes we have in the world, the more likely somebody is to use said nukes to start World War III. And that would be very, 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 very bad. Right? Right. Yeah. But that being said, if certain states aren't allowed to have nukes, fine. I'm perfectly fine with not everybody having nukes, but I think there should be a world order of peace stating that nobody can have nukes, and all 600 whatever nukes we have around the world should be disarmed, right? There shouldn't be any nukes. There shouldn't be any weapons of mass destruction. But if that was the case, America couldn't have them either. And we just can't have that, So that's just not going to happen.
What I'd say is, do you think Iran should have a nuclear weapon? I think most people would say no. Has the president done anything other than use American influence and power to try to accomplish that goal? No, he hasn't. So support the president, recognize he's trying to do something that's very difficult, that other administrations failed to do, and that's end the Iranian nuclear program. I think he's going to do it, and he's going to do it by using clear, restrained, strong American leadership. That's what he was elected to do, and that's what he's going to do.
So how long do you give diplomacy a chance to work before it's time to drop a bunker buster?
Look, the president has to answer that question, right? And I think that what he said is he's going to pursue diplomacy until he thinks that there isn't an opportunity. And once he decides that diplomacy has completely run its course, that we're not going to get anything out of additional talks, then I think the president is going to do what he needs to do to end Iranian enrichment and end that Iranian nuclear program. Again, the president will make that final decision. I do think that we're running out of time, but as the president said yesterday, he wants to give it a little bit more time to see what diplomacy can accomplish. I think we're going to find out, and the Iranians are going to find out the hard way.
I don't know if Trump has ever even used diplomacy in his entire time he's been in office. All right, that's a lie. He's done diplomacy with North Korea, but North Korea has nukes, So basically what he's saying is if you don't have nuke, you will not be getting any diplomacy. Not in Trump's America.
or the easy way. What I'd tell them sitting here right now, Friday afternoon, is please, for the love of God, recognize the President of the United States is very serious about this. He doesn't want you to get a nuclear weapon. He also is more than willing to work with the nation of Iran if it's willing to disarm peacefully. But if it's not willing to disarm peacefully, then we're going to have other options on the table for the President of the United States.
You said you think we're running out of time. The president says he wants to take about 2 weeks to think about it. Is that within?
Well, we all know how that 2 weeks went, don't we? Rather than giving that 2 weeks, he instead did what everybody thought he was going to do and dropped the bombs over the weekend. So it didn't harm the stock market too much, because the stock market is the only thing that rich people actually care about.
Your range?
Well, I think as the president said, he's not going to tell anybody exactly when or what he's going to do. He's going to continue working this process. He's going to let the diplomatic process unfold. And in the meantime, of course, the president of the United States can do whatever he needs to do, whenever he needs to do it to keep the American people safe. I think the president has a very clear sense of what he wants to accomplish and when he wants to accomplish it, but I'll let him to speak to that, because right now his administration has been instructed, do whatever you can to try to solve this problem peacefully, because if we're not going to solve it peacefully, we're going to solve it some way else.
I'm not sure if you heard the president's comments earlier today. He was asked about Tulsi Gabbard, DNI Tulsi Gabbard's comments that there hasn't been intelligence that Iran is close to a nuke. And President Trump said that Tulsi Gabbard is just, quote, wrong. Said she's wrong. There's been reporting that there's maybe a little bit of internal.
All right. Anybody want to bet that Tulsi Gabbard's the first one fired out of his administration this time? I mean, anybody that has any dissent is going to be kicked out of it. Kicked out of his administration. He's done it many times before. I'll take that bet. Yeah, I mean, if Trump doesn't have 100% loyalty in his administration, he's not going to stand for that. And Tulsi Gabbard might just be the first one get cut loose, because she is traditionally very anti-war. She is a scumbag politician like the rest of them. There were some hopes back in the day for Tulsi Gabbard because she was very anti-war and had some good takes on things, but she flipped, and flipped herself into a goddamn administration seat, a goddamn cabinet seat for herself. But that might not be enough for Trump. If Trump's starting to say she's wrong, is she going to push back on him? Like, no, actually, you're wrong, Donald. You're the one getting us into this offensive war for absolutely no reason. There's no proof that Israel or Iran has any nuclear weapons. The IAEA has stated that they only have nuclear energy research being conducted. We would know for sure if they had nuclear weapons if we were still in the Iranian nuclear agreement. But, like we went over yesterday, that had Obama's name on it. And we can't have anything that has Obama's name on it because that doesn't say Trump on it. Trump is a very visual and name-oriented person when it comes to getting things done, right? We know this because during COVID, when that was going on, he specifically wanted those stimulus checks to say, from Donald Trump, from your daddy, from the president of these United States of America, this check comes from me. It has my signature on it. Therefore, this money is coming from me. And, it worked. There were a lot of people that, fell for it. He had his name on the check and everybody was like, tight, man, money? The government has never done anything for me. So this is very strange, getting money. But And for his imagery, it worked. People bought it hook, line, and sinker. But it doesn't really matter if he's just going to do whatever he wants anyways. I mean, he could have pulled out of the Iranian nuclear agreement and then a month later said, we're going to get into a new, better agreement. And that agreement is going to be the Trump-Iran plan. It rhymes. TR or TIP, the tip, just the tip. No nukes, just the tip. The Trump-Iranian plan. And, he could have had the exact same diplomatic language put into that. And, Iranians would have gotten back into it, more than likely. But he didn't do any of that because they wanted to eventually get into Iran. He wanted to have his very own version of Iraq, right? As a Republican president, that's your badge of honor. That's what you leave the seat in. You have to leave with more chaos than you found it, right? So,
Internal turmoil going on. Is that true?
Look, first of all, this rift, whether it's a public rift or a private rift, what I see every single day is, number one, a political movement that's united behind the president's leadership because he's doing great things for the American people, and an administration that is very much united, especially at the senior levels, with doing what President Trump has asked us to do. That's true of Tulsi Gabbard. That's true of everybody else in the administration and the president's national security team. I think the comments that you're referring to are, frankly, a creation of the media. Tulsi has been very consistent that what the president has said about the Iranian nuclear program is true, that they're getting too close, that they're enriching uranium far above the level that would be necessary for civilian uses. The president's been consistent about that. Tulsi Gabbard and every other member of the national security team has been very clear about that. What I see in some of these questions is the media will say, well, Tulsi Gabbard said this. Do you agree with this? And then when you actually look at what Tulsi Gabbard said, she didn't say what the media accuses her of saying. And I think that's true in this case. It's true of a lot of other situations where the media puts words in people's mouths. But trust me, Bill, we're all aligned here. We all agree with what the president is doing. And I think he's trying to lead America to a place where we don't have to worry about a crazy regime getting nuclear weapons. That's a very important place to go.
Last question, we'll let you run. Obviously, a lot of people in President Trump's ear giving him advice.
Sure.
Whether it's the military, his cabinet, you yourself. What advice are you giving him?
The advice that I'm giving him is, sir, trust your instincts. He's got the best instincts of any president I've ever seen, of any political leader that I've ever seen. I think that he knows.
How many political leaders, how many presidents do you think he's been around? One. I was like, I guess he was around Biden a little bit, but not too many. J.D. Vance doesn't have that much experience under his belt. I mean, he wasn't there for Obama, he wasn't there for Bush, he wasn't there for Clinton, he wasn't there for Bush again, he wasn't there for Ronald Reagan, Nixon, Kennedy. He wasn't there for any of these guys. He's just throwing grass into the wind, hoping for the best. It's like, dude, Trump has horrible political instincts. Everything that he does makes the country worse. What are you fucking talking about, dude?
When diplomacy has run its course, and he'll know when ultimately he has to employ the American military to make sure that Iran doesn't have a nuclear program. But I think a lot of people, you're right, are trying to give him advice, but I think the president is incredibly focused on a very narrow thing. Iran can have a nuclear weapon, and he's going to use every tool at his disposal as president of the United States to ensure that.
We are now hearing from President Trump that Iran and Israel have agreed to a ceasefire. And I'm going to read this statement to give you a little bit of time to also kind of come to terms with what this means. And the president saying, congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed to by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their progress, their final missions. For 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the end of the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful on the assumption that everything works as it should, which it will. I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. And this is a war that could have gone on for years, destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. God bless Israel. God bless Iran. God bless the Middle East. God bless the United States of America. God bless the world. This coming in from the president.
Well, that's something at least, huh? I mean, this could have been a very big escalation, but I mean, is this before or after that they bombed our troops in Qatar or whatever? I guess we're gonna have to wait a couple more days to really find out what's going on. But if they're actually calling a ceasefire, I'll take it. This will just fall under the might makes right category, and Trump just had to flex his might just a little bit, just to see where everybody falls, because he is mighty, okay, and everybody else is unmighty. So it's a very good thing. So, what are we at? 46 minutes right now. Let's watch this little Trump clip right here.
Macron.
Well, we have been through a lot of crazy ups and downs and ups. Trump bombing Iran and then calling for a ceasefire, going through with the ceasefire, and now Israel and Iran aren't playing nice, so I don't know what's going on. Who knows? Israel could want to escalate even further and bomb Iran just a little bit more. Excuse me, Donald, we were promised regime change. This is not fair if you don't give us regime change, okay? I thought we had a deal. I don't know why Bibi has a French accent or what I can merely come close to as a French accent, but let's watch this CNN clip explaining that our U.S. airstrikes did pretty much absolutely nothing. All it did was show the world that we are the world police and we will do whatever we want, whenever we want, to whoever we want, regardless if we think they may or may not be on the cusp of World War III or not. So,
3 sources tell CNN that according to an early U.S. intelligence assessment, the U.S. military strikes on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities last weekend did not destroy the core components of the country's nuclear program and likely only set it back a few months.
That's right. So this is an assessment that actually is out from the Defense Intelligence Agency. That is the Pentagon's intelligence arm. And it was based on a battle damage assessment conducted by U.S. CENTCOM after the strikes, according to one of the sources. Let's go to CNN national security correspondent Natasha Bertrand, who has this exclusive new reporting. This is to that question that has been asked about how much damage has been done. This is a real question. It's also a political question that has been to something that Donald Trump has been sort of dealing with here recently. What are you learning, Natasha?
Yeah, look, Brianna, this is the first assessment that we are getting that the U.S. intelligence community has found about the battle damage that resulted from those U.S. military strikes on these 3 Iranian nuclear facilities over the weekend. And as you said, it was produced by the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is the Pentagon's intelligence arm. And it is worth noting that it is a very early assessment. The strikes were only a matter of days ago, and the intelligence community is still gathering intelligence.
So let's just assume that we didn't do anything and what was that? Let's just assume that we didn't do anything to these nuclear sites or whatever they have. I would say, in my humble opinion, that Iran would be completely idiotic to not start developing a nuke. Now, there were rumors that You know, maybe Russia will sell them a nuke. Maybe China will sell them a warhead or whatever. But I don't think that's going to come to fruition because they don't want escalation into World War III. However, there's no way they're not within a month or two of being able to develop a nuclear weapon at this point. I mean, Bibi Netanyahu's been screaming about Iran making nukes for the past 30 fucking years. So if they haven't been researching at least since Trump pulled us out of the Iranian nuclear agreement, what have they been doing this whole time? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating that they do make nukes. I would prefer that the world completely pulls out of nukes and does a worldwide peace agreement and, you know, doesn't escalate any further than needs to be. But being realistic, the only way for a nation to protect themselves from, let's get real, American imperialism is to have a nuclear warhead readily available. You know, that's one of the main reasons we don't mess with North Korea, because they have a nuke and, you know, their leader is on the fucking edge and he's about to break at all times. So, you know, would I be surprised if Kim Jong-un, you know, pulled the trigger on something like that? I would be surprised because I don't think anybody really wants to use nukes at this particular day and age. But, you know, it is a reason why we can't just go in there and, you know, say, hey, what's yours is ours and what's ours is ours. Okay. We're just going to have one Korea now. And this is the leader over here. But that's America. Welcome to it.
Intelligence. They are still working to come up with a full, comprehensive picture of what exactly happened here. But based on a battle damage assessment that was carried out by U.S. Central Command, essentially looking at the images and looking at what was actually damaged, the Defense Intelligence Agency has assessed that the core components of Iran's nuclear program are largely intact, and that Iran's nuclear program has essentially only been set back by months. Now, we presented this information to the White House for comment, and White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt, she did acknowledge the existence of this assessment.
You know, I've also been seeing a lot of people ask, well, you know, if they got nothing to hide, why does it need to be, you know, however many feet under the ground? Well, I mean, it's a very highly radioactive substance they're working with, you know, enriched uranium that they use in, you know, the medical field. They use in energy. They use it in a lot more things than just weapons, right? Weapons is like, you know, the last thing anybody wants to use it in. That's more of a deterrent than anything. But, you know, nuclear energy, I'm a big advocate for. It just needs to be highly, highly regulated so we don't have to see things like Chernobyl or anything like that again. Or, you know, what happened, you know, what was the Japanese place? I'm blanking on the Japanese city that their nuclear reactor was in, and then it got hit by a tsunami, and you know it fucked some shit up. But you know, we need heavily regulated things in the nuclear energy field, or else it's just not going to work out too well. You know. But yeah, back to my main point, you know, before I got sidetracked, it's underground because it's very radioactive. So if a reactor or if something breaks and there's like an exposure, it's not just floating through the air. It's contained in a certain area, which is smart. It's what we want, you know, not to glaze up Iran at all. You know, I don't know much about the culture. I just know they have a higher literacy rate than we do in America. So, I mean, I'm sure they got some very smart people over there that they know how to regulate and keep everything safe, you know, safety first.
But she said in a statement that the administration disagrees with it. She said, quote, "This alleged assessment is flat out wrong and was classified as top secret, but was still leaked to CNN by an anonymous low-level loser in the intelligence community. The leaking of this alleged assessment is a clear attempt to demean President Trump and discredit the brave fighter pilots who conducted a perfectly executed mission to obliterate Iran's nuclear program. Everyone knows what happens when you drop 14 30,000-pound bombs perfectly on their targets, total obliteration." Now, it is worth noting here that there has been dissent, I should say, within the intelligence community, within the defense community about just how much of an impact these massive bunker buster bombs would actually have on Iran's nuclear, and given that these bombs had never been tested in an actual combat scenario, whether they would actually penetrate those very, very deep underground tunnels that lie underneath these nuclear facilities. And what we are told is that as of now, this Defense Intelligence Agency assessment, it does conclude at this point, again, it is still very early, that those underground facilities, including the centrifuges, including the highly enriched uranium that everyone has been talking so much about, those are largely intact. Now, of course, this does stand at odds with what President Donald Trump and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth have been saying in recent days about the impact of these U.S. military strikes. Of course, President Trump said it was totally obliterated, and Secretary Hegseth did as well. And he actually also provided CNN with a statement. And he said that, quote, "Based on everything we have seen, and I've seen it all, our bombing campaign obliterated Iran's ability to create nuclear weapons. Our massive bombs hit exactly the right spot at each target and worked perfectly. The impact of those bombs is buried under a mountain of rubble in Iran. So anyone who says the bombs were not devastating is just trying to undermine the president and the successful mission." Now, our source.
Now, but can we really believe anything that Pete Hegseth says? I mean, he was probably hammered drunk when, he was slurring this this statement out. Based on everything we know, I've seen it all. Our bombing campaign obliterated Iran. Okay, yeah. I mean, okay, Pete Hegseth, you fucking drunk. I mean, talk about unqualified for the position. If there's any one person that's the least qualified for any position in this administration, it's Pete Hegseth, and that's saying something because we have RFK Jr. heading up the Health and Human Services.
Sources did emphasize here that there was severe damage that was done largely to the above ground structures at these nuclear sites. And so there was damage done, of course, by these massive bombs. But the core components of the nuclear program, we are told, they are largely intact, and it only set the program back by a matter of months. Boris Brianna.
Natasha Bertrand, please stand by. Let's go now live to CNN anchor and chief White House correspondent Caitlin Collins, who's traveling with President Trump as he attends a NATO summit from the Netherlands. Caitlin, you heard the statement there from the White House. They acknowledged the existence of this assessment, but said that they disagreed with it and then attacked the sourcing behind it. What are you hearing?
Yeah, and I think it's notable that when we reached out to the White House for comment on what Natasha and Katie Bowe had been hearing here from these sources about this initial assessment, that they provided statements not only from Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, obviously, who is designed to respond to media reports, but also from the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth himself, given he is on the record talking about what he believes the results of these strikes were here. Now, the issue here at hand is obviously this is an initial assessment. We're still waiting for a comprehensive assessment to be done. And as Natasha mentioned there, certainly more information could come to light. And that is how this works as they are in the early days of assessing this. But if this is the assessment that stands as it is right now and what the DIA found, according to this report, that undermines what President Trump has been saying publicly about the result and the impact of these strikes and what they had on Iran's nuclear program. Just this morning, he has been quite defensive about this, saying it's not enough in his view to just say that they were sufficiently damaged. He is saying they were completely destroyed and obliterated, and he's been defending the B-2 bombers and the pilots flying those B-2s that took these bombs over to Iran on Saturday night and dropped them on top of these nuclear sites at great lengths, as he did as he was leaving the White House today. So certainly it would undermine and undercut what the president himself has been saying. But I do think, as Natasha mentioned there, This is an early and preliminary assessment, as they're still waiting to see what the other findings show. But this was the big question going into this. And I had actually asked President Trump this when we were on Air Force One last week, coming back from Canada, because the bombs that were...
I mean, what really stops Iran from moving all their nuclear moving all their enriched uranium to different locations, knowing that Israel is always pushing to bomb Iran, basically. I mean, and Iran would have been stupid to think that a donkey on the edge like Donald Trump would just sit back and not feel like bombing him, you know? I mean, he already, you know, his first term, he assassinated a top Iranian general. So what makes us think that he wouldn't have done something like this? I mean, yeah, I think everybody in the world simultaneously was like, what the fuck are you doing, dude? Like, this is gonna snowball. And, you know, there's still time to snowball. It's only been a few days. But, yeah, back to my point, Iran would have been stupid to not move their stuff around, especially when Israel started attacking them. You know, as soon as those attacks started happening, I feel like the move would have been to, you know, slowly start moving their shit elsewhere in undisclosed locations to the world, and therefore, you know, continuing research, continuing to hopefully not make a nuke, but consider making a nuke to deter the U.S.
used here, Boris and Brianna, had never been used in combat before. Yes, they'd been heavily tested, but they'd never actually been dropped on any site before. And the question I had for the president was, did he have assurances or any guarantees that conducting these U.S. strikes would actually take out Iran's nuclear program? He told me there were no guarantees in life, but obviously that's a key question that we were told he was also asking his officials behind the scenes, is how would this play out? What would this look like? Because
exactly. If only we had a small piece of paper that didn't have some weird president's name, some Kenyan president's name on it, right? You know, what, Barack Hussein Obama, a piece of paper that said Iran shouldn't be making nukes and giving us 100% entrance into their nuclear facilities to monitor them all day, every day, all the time. And according to the IAEA, they were all spot on the entire time, right?
As we know, the president, even with
Trump
military
is such
action
a
in his
fucking
first term, does go through these assessments in a pretty thorough manner to want to know what the other end of this is going to look like.
Yeah, and certainly this is something, Caitlin, just put into context, because President Trump is there in the Netherlands, as you are there following this very important NATO summit. And he has been, you know, projecting this great success. He's also there at this summit that is so much tailored to him. He's riding a little bit of a high as he's there. So any sort of perceived slight to what he considers a great success, and so far the holding of this at least brief ceasefire so far, how is he going to perceive that?
Yeah, and the president has been at NATO summits before where things did not go well. I mean, everyone remembers the Brussels summit of his first term, where he walked out of the room at one point. So often when he comes to these, and there is a new NATO Secretary General this time, who was sending the president messages earlier today that Trump was then posting screenshots of on Truth Social, saying that they were essentially waiting for his arrival here, as he just arrived a few hours ago. A lot of this is going to focus on defense spending. A lot of it's going to focus on Russia as well. The Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, is going to be here for his meeting with the president. It is only their second meeting since that fiery Oval Office meeting that happened a few months ago. And so that is something everyone's going to be watching closely. But the fact that the key takeaway here is, you know, going into these summits, they largely decide what they're going to talk about beforehand. Though obviously when President Trump is in the room, as his own aides will very, very well and readily concede, things can change, and you don't always know what the outcome is going to be. But the fact that it is tailored to be on defense spending, which is his chief complaint with NATO countries, that they do not spend enough on defense, does show the impact that he has on the conversations that are held at summits like this one. But he was wanting to come into this with...
Yeah, I mean, of course. America spends the most on NATO because America wants to be in charge and wants to be the world police. I think everybody else is spending a substantial amount of money for NATO for defense and organizing, you know, as a force against evil, if you will. But it should be expanded upon. Maybe even, I hesitate to say let Ukraine in because that would escalate things with Russia, but come up with some kind of deal between Russia and Ukraine and, you know, I don't know. I think NATO should be expanded and all that good stuff. Let's get into this one. What Trump had to say.
Mr. President, the Middle East just woke up to a new dawn because of the ceasefire. Mr. President, Israel said ceasefire breaking is impact.
I don't think so, but I'm not happy that Israel's going out now. There was one rocket that I guess was fired overboard. It was after the time limit, and it missed its target. And now Israel's going out. These guys got to calm down. Ridiculous.
How will you respond if the ceasefire is fired?
I didn't like plenty of things I saw yesterday. I didn't like the fact that Israel unloaded right after we made the deal. They didn't have to unload.
Oh, you're surprised that Israel isn't falling in line? Because last time I checked, it seems like Israel's in charge of everything. The way they act. I mean, let's get real. They know what's going on because Epstein was Mossad, Israeli special forces or special intelligence or whatever. And, you know, Trump's going along with it to keep his blackmail down. More than likely, they got stuff on the Epstein files or whatever, but that's, you know, that's a big side now. That's a conspiracy theory as it stands, but, you know, I wouldn't doubt it. But what does Trump expect? Of course, Israel's going to just go do whatever they want all the time, every day of the week, because they feel like they can. We allow them to do whatever they want all the time. Therefore, they're co-signed because America says we can. You know, it's fine. You know, all these people over here, Gaza, who cares, right? We're just going to blow them up. Oh, America, you want to send in aid? Nah. Aid doesn't sound like a good time. You know what sounds like a good time? Mowing the grass. And, you know, Israel has come to realize that they are in charge. They know they're in charge. They get to do whatever they want and still be funneled money from the United States. You know, we fund them so fucking much. So much. And yet they have a single payer healthcare system for their citizens, and us in America, we could just die, I guess. Dying sounds good. It's crazy, dude. I mean, what does anybody expect?
And I didn't like the fact that the retaliation was very strong, but in all fairness, Israel unloaded a lot. And now I hear Israel just went out because they felt it was violated by one rocket that didn't land anywhere. That's not what we want, I'll tell you. And I'm telling you, I'm not happy about that, Israel, either. All I do is play both sides. I'm going now, as you know, to NATO. Some of you are going with me, and I think it's going to be successful. We'll see. I'll let you know.
Are you going to be the agreement? It's a new dawn in the Middle East thanks to the agreement you managed to achieve. What are your future plans for the region, for Saudi Arabia, Israel, Gaza, the hostages?
Look, you're asking me about women in the Middle East. It's getting a lot better. Things are happening at a high level. As you know, Saudi Arabia's done a really good job. It's coming out far faster than I thought. So we're very happy about what's happening with women in the Middle East.
No, I'm talking about a new dawn in the Middle East that you managed to achieve last night.
Yeah.
You know, the region is going to a new place with this agreement. Can you tell us what's your future plans for Gaza, for the hostages?
Yeah. It's a new dawn. I appreciate the question. You're very nice. Who are you?
Thank you. I'm Neria Kraus from Israeli Channel 13 News.
Well, we have to have Israel calm down because they went on a mission this morning. I got to get Israel to calm down now.
Did you get to speak with the Prime Minister? Did you talk to Prime Minister Netanyahu last night?
I speak to everybody.
You urge both sides not to violate the ceasefire, but reports coming from the region suggest that the sides accuse each other for violating the ceasefire. So
I think they both violated it. I don't think I'm not sure they did it intentionally. They couldn't rein people back. I don't like the fact that Israel went out this morning at all, and I'm going to see if I can stop it. So as soon as I get away from you, I'm going to see if I can stop it, okay?
I'll see if I can stop it. You know what? You know what stopping Israel would take from a president? Hello, Prime Minister of Israel. Knock it off. You don't want to knock it off? I don't care. If you don't knock it off, we're not going to send you any money anymore, okay? Okay? No. You have to knock it off. Okay, bye. See? That's all it would take. It takes a phone call. You know? Obama did it. Bush did it. Clinton did it. They make them knock it off because that's what we have to do as America. We make Israel knock it off because we've basically funded them and their existence. Yeah, they're a sovereign nation. They can take care of their own funds and stuff, but we treat them as a floating we treat them as a unsinkable warship in the Middle East that we can just use as a giant base of operations and then do whatever we want. But, you know, it's also escalated by, you know, Bibi Netanyahu, because they think that they could just do imperialism, you know, when imperialism is America's job.
How confident are you that Iran's completely demolished? I think it's been completely demolished. I think the reason we're here is because those pilots, those B-2 pilots, did an unbelievable job. And, you know, the fake news, like CNN in particular, they're trying to say, well, I agree that it was destroyed, but maybe not that destroyed. You know what they're doing?
The fake news is saying that we didn't do a good job destroying Iran's nuclear facilities. I'll tell you what, Communist News Network, we did super duper good. Do you know how big those bombs were? Those bombs were massive, biggest bombs that I've ever seen. It wasn't the Moab, but they were giant bunker busters, and we busted some bunkers.
They're really hurting great pilots that put their lives in the line. CNN is scum, and so is MSDNC. They're all, and frankly, the networks aren't much better. It's all fake news, but they should not have done that. Those pilots hit their targets. Those targets were obliterated, and the pilots should be given credit. They're not after the pilots, they're after me. They want to try and demean.
You don't believe that Iran can rebuild its nuclear program?
Iran will never rebuild its nuclear. From there? Absolutely not. That place is under rock. That place is demolished. The B-2 pilots did their job. They did it better than anybody could even imagine. They hit late in the evening. It was dark with no moon, and they hit that target with every one of those things, and that place is gone. But when I see CNN all night long, they're trying to say, well, maybe it wasn't really as demolished as we thought. It was demolished. You take a look at the pinpricks, and you see that place is gone. And I will say, I think CNN ought to apologize to the pilots of the B-2s. I think that MSDNC ought to apologize. I think these guys really, these networks and these cable...
This is coming from a guy that won't even apologize to the people that he's sexually harassed, okay? He doesn't apologize to E. Jean Carroll for what he did to her. You know, in fact, he doubles down and said, I would never do such a thing. She's disgusting, you know. So he expects people to apologize to fighter jets that are dropping bombs, but he won't apologize for people that he's assaulting. Okay, awesome.
Networks are real losers. You really are. You're real losers. You're gutless losers. I say that to CNN because I watch it. I have no choice. I got to watch it.
You don't watch it. Donnie, let's get real, bruh. You don't watch it. You don't watch the Communist News Network. You don't watch CS or MSDNC. You don't watch anything that comes close to even the center. You know, you watch Fox News. You probably watch some One American News Network, and then maybe some crazy shit like Tim Pool or something, because your son watches that shit and he shows you clips of the Beanie Boy. But you don't watch any of this other shit. Don't be lying, bruh.
Garbage. It's all garbage. It's all fake news. But I think
That's pretty true. It's all manufactured garbage that they say what they want you to believe and leave it at that.
CNN is a gutless group of people, and the people that run it, nobody even knows it's been sold so many times, but the people that run it ought to be ashamed. MSDNC, a guy named Brian Roberts, he heads it. He's a disgrace. He's a weak, pathetic disgrace.
Israel says that Iran violated the peace agreement, the ceasefire agreement. Do you believe that Iran is still committed to peace?
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too.
Are you questioning if Israel is committed?
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not.
BB came in. It was big. He dropped some hot loads on there. The biggest loads I've ever seen. I've never seen a bigger load come out of anybody. But BB, oh boy, he had some big loads on him.
Not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because the one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically.
That must have been they must have blurted out. That's the part where he drops the F-bomb right there. Oh, you can't say that on YouTube. He said something about I don't like the way neither of them are fucking acting right now or whatever. You know, it was pretty stupid, but you know, the decorum. I wonder if any of the decorum police on the right are going to come out and Trump is not using decorum. He's just really mad that Israel is not doing exactly what he wants. But, you know, the State Department rep isn't.
The pride of being able to be here and do work that facilitates making things better for people. And in the greatest country on earth, next to Israel. It's an honor.
Did you have to throw that in? Where are all, you know, since this video clip came out, I have not heard one America First Andy come out and say, oh, she needs to be deported. She needs to be thrown out of here. ICE agents, come grab her. She's not American anymore. She said Israel's better than America. No. You know why? Because all of the Republican Party is paid for by the Israel lobby. The vast majority of the Democratic Party are also paid for by the Israel lobby. You know, it's why we can't have nice things in this country because, you know, one, we have to funnel money to places like Israel in order for them to commit genocide and, you know, just do whatever they want all the time forever. And two, because, you know, we are also at the whims of corporations, you know. Every corporation out there also has their hands in our government, therefore limiting what we can and can't do in this country, you know. I don't like that there. But yeah, I mean, I haven't heard one America First person come out and say this lady is a goddamn disgrace. She should not be able to hold her position anymore because she does not represent, she represents Israel. Because she literally just said Israel's better than the United States.
Honored to be able to make a difference and to be able to speak in this regard with an administration that I love so much and that I feel genuinely represented by. It's a real honor.
Now, which administration is she talking about? Is she talking about Bibi's regime or is she talking about Trump's regime? Because she wasn't really clear there. You know, she told us that Israel was better than America. So, you know, I assume one daddy is better than the other daddy, or are they double teaming, going double daddy on her? I don't know. And we're going to watch this clip. I don't know if anybody remembers her, but, you know, she got to go up and speak for a second and, you know, speak for all immigrants in this country on why Donald Trump should win the election.
I'm Hispanic and I vote for Mr. Trump. We vote for Mr. Trump. Yes, Mr. Trump. We love.
You see Trump down here just fucking copping a feel on the sides right here, just patting her down like, "What's up? You want to see who you're voting for? I'll show you in a second."
Trump, we love you. We love you. All the way to the White House.
Beyond betrayed. They used us. They actually, during the campaign, and I don't want to make this political, but during...
I don't want to make this political, but, you know, the fact that she was up there politically, does she not want to make it political anymore because, you know, her daddy is the one involved, Daddy Trump? So it's going to make him look a little bad, even though obviously, you know, everybody on the left was saying, as a immigrant, you should not be voting for Trump because Trump is bad. Trump doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about your family. He doesn't care about anybody except himself. So if you think that you are safe voting for this fascist, you got something coming, you know? And then almost directly into his office, he basically did a hard fascist turn. Not that he was already fascist. Let's get that straight. He hit all the guys of being fascist in his first term. Okay. But this was obvious. And this is not a sentiment held by just this lady. I want to say that real quick. It's not just this lady. I have insider information of people I've spoken to, and it is not rare that, like, say, immigrants from Mexico, males in particularly, men from Mexico, if they become citizens, they tend to gravitate towards the Republican Party because they're just like all the rest of our Republicans. They got the "I got mine" mentality, right? I got mine. You need to get yours. I worked hard. Why don't you work hard? You got bootstraps, don't you? So they get their citizenship, and then they start shitting on all the immigrants that do not have citizenship, all the illegals, if you will. But it's crazy, dude. Like, you're going against your own family members at that point. You know, I could see where the sentiment comes from like a member of the KKK, and he would vote for Trump because he wants America to be white. You know, this lady, on the other hand, she thinks that Trump's going to make it better and make it easier for her family to come over to America. And that was not the case, and that was never going to be the case, you know?
In the campaign, the elected officials from the Republican Party, they actually told us that he was not going to touch the documented people.
Yeah, I mean that was just a lie. He's gonna go after anybody that is not a legal U.S. citizen. Like, and you got to be like for real. Like, you got to be holding that green card. You take that motherfucker with you everywhere. If you get caught without that thing, sorry, you're illegal again. Don't know what to tell you. Shouldn't have crossed that border. You know that's a misdemeanor, right? We take misdemeanors in this country very seriously. Felonies, not so much. Felonies, you might become president. Misdemeanors, nah. All you're going to get out of a misdemeanor is deportation. Welcome to America, right? And then we got this. 128 Democrats helped Republicans kill a resolution to impeach Trump. Now, am I surprised? Let's read a little bit, see what it says. A majority of House Democrats have killed Texas Representative Al Green's articles to impeach against Donald Trump. The House voted 344 to 79 to table Green's resolution on Tuesday, just hours after the introduction. Green filed articles of grounds of abuse of presidential powers by decreeing the separation of powers, devolving American democracy into authoritarianism, and unconstitutionally usurping Congress's power to declare war. Am I surprised that 128 Democrats voted to not impeach Donald Trump? No, I'm not surprised. Why am I not surprised? Because, you know what? I could have made that bigger, huh? Yeah. I am not surprised because he is all these people are paid by the Israel lobby. And not only are they paid by the Israel lobby, they're paid by other lobbyists. And, you know, big business, they have a reason to like Donald Trump. Therefore, they're going to keep him in office as much as they can. Right? So, is it ridiculous? Yes. Has Donald Trump overreached and went into authoritarianism? Absolutely, without question. You know, or else you wouldn't see all these ICE raids going on. But let's see. These are all the. Are these all the people that went against him? Let's see. Yeah, that's crazy. There's one from Oregon. That's not my representative. Yeah. Only one from Oregon. You know, what are you going to do about it? But if your representative is on this list, again, okay, that is very important. We can't have people like that, you know, running around Congress. Oh, I saved a couple good ones for the final, the ass end of my stream. This is just, you know, classic hypocrisy of Trump supporters. This video has been floating around a little bit, so we'll just check that out.
We're going to start out, and I want to share some leaked audio. And, you know, this is audio of Trump saying some things, and we need your candid thoughts on what to do, right? This is not out at this point, but we need to have a plan in place on how to react and respond to this stuff if it ends up in the media. So.
Look, I need cameras in the dressing room. You know, cameras on the wall, cameras on the floor, aimed up at their whatevers. I want the best camera.
They need to be aimed up at the whatevers. Put them in the toilets. Put them above the toilets. Put them in the bras. However you need to do it. I know those cameras, they can get really small, so put them in the shoelaces if they have to be.
Set up by the best Chinaman. Understand?
Yeah, well, that could be a violation of...
It's to make sure that they're safe.
Safe?
I mean, look, I can't be there all day. I'll just start grabbing them. Believe me, for them, not me. I'm a man. They're beautiful women. It's totally natural. You know, sometimes I'll walk in naked. So then we're all naked. I mean, if they file a complaint against me, I can file it right back at them. The Jew lawyer taught me that one.
We need to have a plan in place on how to react and respond to this stuff if it ends up in the media.
Well, this is obviously old. It's before he decided he was going to be a politician. I personally don't care. I just don't care.
See, I like him because he says all. I like him because he says all that. We love it when he says whatever.
I like it. I like the way he talks. You know what? Donald Trump, you can put cameras all in my house. Do whatever you need to do, Daddy. What's up? And then the guy before, oh, it seems like a very old video. It showed 2006. Oh, this was before he became a politician. You know, it's awesome. It's awesome that Trump supporters don't even know the history of Donald Trump. You know, he literally ran for presidential office as a third-party candidate in 2002. Maybe it was 2000, but obviously he lost because, you know, he didn't go for the right party. You know, if he would have went Republican off the bat, he might have had it, you know, because like he said in like the 70s or 80s, while he was a Democrat, you know, if I ever ran for president, I'd run as a Republican because those people are really stupid and easy to manipulate.
That's what everybody thinks and won't say. And with that personality goes those kind of comments most of the time.
As a man, I know I've been in situations, we've been in locker rooms, it's man talk. I've done it, said it, they've done it, said it. I've been around plenty of men, professional, I mean, you name it, every man has said something to the effects that, you know.
That they'd like to put the camera in a teenage girl's changing room.
All right, we're going to move on to the next one.
We'll be back with lots more of Donald Trump. Don't go away.
Okay, so am I doing all right, Larry? Because I'm a little woozy. I just get back from giving blood for this paternity test.
So what do they have to say?
It's for Ivanka. I'm double checking that she's really my daughter. You know, I don't want to go my whole life and find out that she was fair game after all, you know?
Your own birth.
It's just that she's voluptuous, successful, and, you know, frankly, I heard she's great in bed.
And we're back in 5,
Okay.
4.
Does oral count as incest?
We're back with Donald Trump and it's all over the board tonight.
You see all the gears turning in their head like, oh man, I gotta come up with something hot for this one. I mean, come on, Trump. You gotta give us a little bit of wiggle room.
Okay, so how do you feel about this one?
He's complimenting his daughter, like in his head type of thing.
Yes, it's crass because that is his own daughter. He's still a human male. As a male, I do say some things that.
Dude, this last guy, he was the most Reddit moderator ass motherfucker on this panel. Of course he was gonna say some shit like that. Of course, he's a human being, and let's get real. Ivanka Trump, okay, bro, come on, let's get real. Trump, what are we gonna do with you? Well, hopefully impeach. But you know, if the House has anything to say about that, that's not gonna happen. I will say, going back to this impeachment article, maybe there was just too much language in it. I'm going to run a little bit of cover for these Democrats. Maybe the language just was a little too harsh. I need to look into the resolution a little bit. I guess we'll just, can we see it right now? I don't know. But, you know, Al Green, he got what it takes. I mean, This was a good one also. Let's check this video out.
The American public knows what this bill does. One of the little things that it does, would you please read page 901, line 20?
I think it'd be better if you read it.
Oh, he doesn't want to read it.
I'll
read it.
I know the
actually,
legislation, but I'm
Ranking
not
Member
be
Moore.
part of your little
Ranking Member
show
Moore
here, so you can read it.
It was a question if you would read it, so I'll ask Ranking
sit
Member
down?
Moore to read the text. This is in their bill. They don't want to read a line from their own bill. Ranking Member.
I don't want to read the bill for you.
Bro, you're on a hearing and they're talking to you about this bill and you refuse to read it. Like, what kind of piece of shit are you, dude? Like, just read the bill. We know you haven't read it yet. 'Cause that's why you don't want to read it, because you haven't read it before and you don't want to read something that sounds incredibly insidious, right? As a classic Republican, you know. But because Republicans, you know, in the Senate and House, for the most part, I doubt they read any of these monstrous bills. They just see who's signing off on them. They say, okay, well, if Trump's doing it, wait, do we have money for my state? Yeah. Okay. Do we have money to take away from the poor people in my state? Better question. Okay. Follow-up question. Do we have money to kill people in my state? No money for that this time? Okay. Maybe next. Can we get it on the next one at least? Oh, awesome. Cool. Thank you.
I'll help you out. I am testifying about this legislation. I'm not going to read the bill to you.
Okay, I am. This is amazing.
Ms.
You
Lager
are
Fernandez, shall I pass this back or shall I read
No,
it for
why
you?
don't you just read it?
Section 111106, repeal of excise tax on indoor tanning services.
So they're going to repeal. They're repealing an excise tax on tanning beds. Okay, so if you have a tanning bed, you get a little bit of a tax break. And if you need a hospital bed in rural America, I'm sorry, you're out of luck, right? And I don't know where this particular provision came from. We do know that there are certain elected officials who appear to have a certain orange hue about them, that maybe they want to make sure that tanning beds get a little bit of special credit. But really, we are prioritizing tanning beds over hospital beds in rural America. So that the
I mean, when has a Republican voter ever even considered voting in their best interest? You know, that's why they vote these monsters in, because they don't give a fuck about themselves as long as the immigrants, you know, don't get anything nice either, right? You hear that argument all the time on why we can't have a Medicare for all, single payer system, whatever you want to call it. Well, you know, all these illegals and lazy people are going to get free medical services, you know, and I'm going to have to pay for it. Dude, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're already paying for that. It's coming out of your pocket, you know. We're subsidizing, you know, lower class people, and well, as somebody who's come from very lower class, you know, I'm speaking from a point of authority. You know, I wasn't one that had health insurance, but, you know, could have had health insurance. But anyways, you know, we're already paying for all this shit. The only people getting screwed is the people in middle America. Not middle America like Nebraska. I mean, the middle wage earners of America. And I mean, you know, anybody from the bottom 50%, no, probably bottom 70%, all the way up to the bottom, or all the way up to the top 10%. You know, those are the people that are getting the big swings of getting fucked over. But, you know, it's just crazy how we treat the American citizens. But, you know, we can't have health care, but we can tax subsidize people who want to buy tanning beds, because that really helps, right? These tanning beds are really helping out America. You know, I wouldn't want to see RFK having to go into the tanning salon like we seen a video of him the other day. You know, he should have one at his house. You know, he's important enough. He deserves a room with a tanning bed, okay? And, you know, it's really mean, but Trump won't let the administration use his tanning bed. I mean, yeah, it's a spray booth, but, you know, tomato, potato. But anyways, that's all the time I got for you guys today. Everybody that stayed and watched a little bit, I really appreciate it. And I will talk to you on the next one later. Trump just absolutely loves chaos. We're just going to go over a few videos and all that and see what's going on in the world today, huh? Not like there's much going on. We're going to start off with some immigration stuff.
To escalate immigration enforcement operations around the country, we're joined as the Trump administration continues to escalate immigration enforcement operations around the country. We're joined now by Tricia McLaughlin. She's the Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at the Department of Homeland Security. Tricia, welcome to the NewsHour. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.
So I just want to ask you first about some reports about Secretary Noem being hospitalized yesterday after suffering an allergic reaction. What can you tell us today about how
before we get to what actually went on, I don't pre-watch anything on here. I just go straight off the cuff because, you know, planning things out takes effort, and I ain't got none of that. My assumption is Kristi Noem is allergic to telling the truth. Go.
How she's doing?
She's doing well, Amna. Thank you for asking. She was discharged from the hospital last night, and she's doing well, recovering. We just brought her to the hospital out of an abundance of caution.
Thank you for that update. I do want to turn now to what we've seen in a lot of headlines, what I know is a priority for this president and seeing through his pledge of mass deportations. We saw the president on Thursday say that business leaders from agriculture and hotel and leisure had expressed worries to him that your immigration policy was, quote, taking very good long-time workers away from them, impacting their businesses. In the days since, we've seen reports, of course, that ICE agents have continued to carry out raids on some of those businesses and agriculture and hotels and restaurants. Can you just clarify what the policy is? Despite the president's concerns that he raised, are those raids on those businesses still being carried out?
Absolutely, Amna. And just to clarify this, our number one concern is violent criminals. And part of the way...
That's bullshit. Stop the tape. She's lying. Our number one concern is violent criminals. If that was the case, they would have been done a month into the Trump administration and called it good, switched up the tactics. Except no, they doubled down. They called for even more people to be deported on the daily quota and less focusing on criminals, right? Unless they are categorizing criminals as people who illegally crossed the border or overstayed a visa. In my opinion, that's not a criminal act that is worthy of mass deportations on this level set out by federal agents, right? What is a criminal, in my opinion? You know, a murderer, yeah. Even an immigrant that violates the law on a lower level, you know, I would even say theft, larceny, white collar crimes, of course, you know, but we don't prosecute white collar crimes in America because then we wouldn't have any administration to lead us, right? It would be no corruption to be had, so why would anybody want to take the job, right? That's the thought process of all of these legislators. Well, why would I do it if I can't get rich? It doesn't even make sense. Anyways, back to my thoughts. Yeah, real criminals, you know, murder, sexual assault, you know, regular assault, battery, you know, immigrants should be held to a higher standard. Sorry, that might be my privilege coming out, but you know, if you're coming into another country, you should be able to follow the laws to a T. Because if I go to a country and I'm not following the laws, I would expect them to kick me out. You know, it might be harsh of me to say, but you know, it's true. You know, even us as Americans, we got to follow the law to a T, or else, you know, the cops just pull you out of your car and blast you these days. They don't even beat you up anymore. They just go straight for the gun, you know. But the fact of the matter is the Trump administration is not strictly going for criminals, quote unquote, you know, because criminals could be looked at as a blanket terminology for anybody that committed a misdemeanor and crossed the border illegally, right? But it's bullshit. They're going for people that are working hard. They're looking at Home Depots. They're going to job sites. They're going to farms, you know, and it's really going to hurt our economy if they keep on doing this mass deportation, because immigrants bring in a lot of revenue to our GDP. Not only do they add to our GDP, they also add to economic growth, because people need to be there to buy the things to grow the economy. It's just simple economics.
That we find these violent criminals is through these worksite enforcement actions. That very much is the cornerstone of our operations. Actually, most recently in Los Angeles, we had an operation where we did locate multiple drug traffickers. We're finding that these worksite enforcements oftentimes find human traffickers, labor traffickers, or otherwise exploiting these migrants for cheap labor, unsafe working conditions. So those are not on pause. Those will.
That sounds like a fucking big stretch. Hi. Finding drug traffickers and human traffickers and these bad guys and those bad guys, I feel like is a very big stretch to say, well, you know, the 1 out of the